patience today. I'm telling you, it's going to be worth it. I am Desiree Jones, and I am the Vice President of Programs and co-chair of the Programs Committee for the Black Public Relations Society of Atlanta. And today we have Mr. Andrew McCaskill with us. Hey, Andrew.
Hey, Desiree.
Thank you guys for joining us for Beyond the Corporate Statement, where we are talking about how communicators and marketers can hold their companies accountable for the statements that they made around the Black community and supporting the Black community. And this is hosted by, in partnership with The Gathering Spot and the Black Public Relations Society of Atlanta. Thank you guys for joining us, and we are so excited to have former Beepers president, Andrew McCaskill, who really just, you don't even have to ask where Andrew works. You really just have to Google him and you find out who he is. And I consider him the guru of all things Black economics, Black culture, and Andrew has really broken away from really any type of boundaries, because Andrew can sit here and talk to you on so many levels about so many things that are important to the Black community. And so we brought Andrew here today because he has really been a living example of holding companies accountable. And we want him to really share his wisdom and expertise with us today. So thank you for joining us, Andrew.
Thank you for having me. I love Beepers. When I was living in Atlanta, Beepers was my conduit to other Black professionals in this space. And the folks that I met through Beepers, the relationships that I had through Beepers have propelled me forward long beyond my time in Atlanta. I can remember being Nielsen sent me to Shanghai for a year, and I don't speak Mandarin, and I'm a big Black guy. And I had responsibility for revamping the corporate function, the corporate communications function for Greater China, which is Taiwan, Hong Kong, and mainland China. Mm-hmm. And there were executives in Beepers and folks in Beepers that I would, lob questions over to and say, hey, what do you think about this? What do you think about, me making this move? What do you think about, me doing this in the region? And not to mention folks like, Alicia Thompson and Lori George Billingsley have just, fed into me, prayed for me.
Right.
I'm talking about
in real
prayed
time.
for you.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Like that type of love that I have gotten from Beepers and folks from Beepers that I've worked with and things like that post my Beepers life. So love Beepers Atlanta.
We are both products of Beepers, pouring love. I remember being a senior in college. I didn't know what was next. And Beepers was like, yeah, come to this event. And then they just gave me $1,000. And I was like, first of all, this is going towards my rent. Y'all don't even know. No, but seriously, yeah. Alicia Thompson has touched both of our lives. Malcolm, we here. Look at us. Aren't you proud? These are people who have really purposefully poured into the lives of Black young people who were interested in public relations. And this organization next year celebrates its 20th anniversary. And I am so proud to be on this stage just speaking on their behalf because it is such an honor. Yeah. Absolutely.
Same, 100%.
And just for those of you who may be too busy and haven't really been paying attention, so you may not know who Andrew is, but Andrew is he currently is a communications lead for LinkedIn, but I met him when he was with Nielsen and even got the opportunity to sample some of his work with the Nielsen Diverse Intelligence Series reports. And so, Andrew, that's where I really want to get started. Sure. Because Nielsen, if anyone doesn't know Nielsen, Nielsen is known for their television ratings, but for the past 10 years, they've released an annual report on Black consumer behavior, viewing, spending habits, the ways we get our media, and all of those things. And so a lot of corporations lean into the data from that report to understand how to market to Black consumers. But Andrew, you can tell if you look at a Nielsen report, probably within the past 5 years, it's a little bit saucier than maybe in the past. And so when you read it, you can see your voice as a co-author of the report all through the report. Can you tell me why that was so important when you got that role to say, look, Andrew, we want you to be a part of this report? What did you want to bring to it that wasn't already there?
So first of all, shout out to Cheryl Grace, Senior Vice President of Consumer Engagement at Nielsen, who the Diverse Intelligence series was her brainchild. And the beautiful, brilliant brain of Cheryl Grace is all through this entire, that work, in the legacy of that work. When I took over the Diverse Intelligence series, I wanted to bring the culture to it in a different way. And the report was amazing. It was a tool that was used to sort of educate marketers and educate manufacturers and retailers about the value and the impact of the Black community, our dollars, as well as our impact on the economics of their brands and what the opportunity was. What I wanted to do with the Diverse Intelligence series when I took it over was I wanted to bring the culture to it. I felt like that what brands did not understand was Black people's impact on culture. Absolutely. It wasn't just about economics, it was about culture. And I wanted to bring that nuance to it. That's why some of the language was a little bit different. What I also wanted to do was that I felt like the report had the opportunity to also be a tool for the community as much as it was a tool for the corporations, right? So when I started looking at the data, I said, we haven't talked about intersections. We're not talking about the power of Black women. We're not busting myths about the power of Black millennials. We're not looking at this from the standpoint of where the culture meets the economy. African Americans there are 48.2 African Americans in this country, and we represent $1.4 trillion in annual spending. If Black folks were a country, we would be the 15th largest GDP in the world. Between Spain and Australia.
If we were Wakanda?
Right, exactly. I was just going to say, we would be the 15th largest GDP in the world.
Absolutely.
Between Spain and Australia is the wonderful kingdom of Wakanda, right? Or Black America, as I call it. And so that's a lot of economic power. We should be, of course, talking about Black wealth and Black wealth creation. Those are things, too, that are really important to our community, and they cannot be left out of the conversation. But all money is power. All money is power, even the money we spend, but more importantly, when we don't spend our money. We have seen how us not spending our money makes movements progress, right? And so what I wanted to do with the Diverse Intelligence series was I wanted to create a tool that, yes, corporations could look at it and see our value, but if they didn't see our value, that for the sister who was trying to get a loan for her new business, for her small business that she was starting up, that she could use that data and make the case for why there was an opportunity for her business to survive and thrive. Absolutely. For the 3 millennials sitting in a room that had a startup, I wanted them to have the data and the insights, the same stuff that Procter & Gamble was using, that Coca-Cola was using, that PepsiCo was using. I wanted to gift that to them so that they could have that exact same data when they were putting together their deck for how they were going to get funding from an angel investor or from anyone that was trying to invest in their startup or in their tech. I wanted us to be able to look at that data and that information as an opportunity for empowerment. And so when we talk to Black folks and Black consumers, Cheryl and I, we weren't just talking to corporations. We were talking to consumers, people who wanted to start businesses, people who were thinking about how do I start using the language of business? And the language of business is numbers and data, and we were giving it to them for free. And so what I wanted to do was to break down that barrier of the language and start talking to people in the culture, in the community, in terms that made sense to them, that made them see themselves in the data in a way that was empowering and not just that they were an opportunity for a company or a corporation.
No, absolutely. I remember reading the Black Girl Magic Report and seriously being amped. 60 pages later, being amped, first of all, we popping, okay? and nobody could tell me anything different. And what Nielsen did was put the data to it. Like, we already knew, but Nielsen gave us the data, and your contributions to that report. I mean, I would read it and be like, this is Andrew's voice. Like, this is something Andrew would say. No, absolutely.
I appreciate that.
And so the one thing that, a lot of the people listening in today are marketers and communicators. And the one thing that we want to make sure they take away today is kind of like extract from you how your experience can be applied to them. I know we all go through a lot of different things, but your experience and the way that you transformed yourself and your personal brand and your career has really been powerful. So that's why having you leading this conversation is really important. The one thing I wanted to ask you is, like, when did you realize that your contributions to your company as it related to speaking to African American consumers and really educating them on our value, when did you realize that you were invaluable in that role?
It's an interesting question in terms of like recognizing your value. I think that for me, it was looking at the fact that I have had jobs where I knew I was not going to be there for a long time, right? Full transparency, I spent 15 years in agency life. And agency life is very hard on Black folks. I say that all the time. I've said that to the heads of the agencies and the owners of the agencies that I've worked for. And I rose through the ranks of agency. I was senior vice president at Weber Shandwick, New York, was senior vice president of boutique agencies here in Atlanta. And what I had to learn for myself, which was a really hard lesson that came from some really bad performance reviews and came from some, not just all of the, oh, you're amazing, Drew, conversations, was that roles change, missions don't. And so for me, my mission was about economic empowerment. It was about using platforms that I, have privy to make sure that people who look like me and who look like you have information and have opportunity that they might not have if we don't exercise our power inside of those organizations, right? And so that to me was, and it's not always been beneficial, right? Like, I no longer work for Nielsen. Right. Let's just say that.
We will talk about, like, we know there is a risk associated with that.
Yeah. There's a huge risk sometimes associated with being in corporate spaces and advocating for the culture and the community. But it's like, it's really interesting that, people love to quote Jay-Z when in his quote where he says, we are the culture, nothing moves without us, right? And what was important to me at work was I heard all of these diversity folks saying that, be yourself at work, right? And
bring your whole self.
Bring your whole self to work. And
but not your locks, or not your natural hair, not your afro bigger than the boardroom.
Listen, and bring your whole self to work is a trick of the enemy, right? And that's my personal belief. And I've worked in diversity and inclusion, and equity work is what I do now currently. A lot of it is that I think when I say bring your whole self to work is a trick of the enemy when it comes to people of color. And Black folks. Like, there are organizations that will let you wear your natural hair, but have a real problem when you start talking about what is our responsibility to Black consumers when there are categories of products that we have in our catalog that if Black folks stop buying those products, that the entire category would collapse. So bring your authentic self to work is what I say, right? Because full transparency, the company doesn't need 3 a.m. in Ibiza Drew at work anyway, right? But when I say being authentic at work for me wasn't about wearing Jordans, even though I wore Jordans at work. Being authentic at work for me was about, I care about my community. I feel like that we should have a reciprocal relationship with the people whose money propels us. Right? And so whether it was at my former employer, where if Black folks didn't put that shiny blinking box in their house, then we wouldn't be able to show data around what's going on with who's watching television or who's buying products, right? And so there was a responsibility to those consumers, and we had to value them and have a reciprocal relationship with them to where we appreciate culture and not appropriate culture.
Absolutely. And you kind of touched upon my next question, but the one thing that probably a lot of marketers and Black marketers and communicators are learning right now is that actually you do have value, because your companies have probably leaned into you so much more than any other time, in a lot of people's careers. So what I want to explore is, like, how do you take that and use that to do exactly what you just said, to take your companies to task? You take that value because they've asked you to write the statement or review the statement, or they've asked you, what is the appropriate language for this? What organizations should we be looking at when we're thinking about supporting the Black community? And Black people have stood up and they've said, oh yeah, and passionately, right? Okay, so now what? Now that they've given their experience and lent it to their employers or their clients, what is the path to actually holding them accountable?
I think that part of it is that we have to say in those spaces that we have to be really, really honest. One, be honest with ourselves that we are not the kings and queens of Black America. Our Black experience may not be the exact Black experience of everybody else, of that other 48 million Black folks, right? And so you can't just have one voice, one Black voice in the room. What you have to do is partially say, hey, I'm a great resource. I'm not the only resource. I do not speak for all of Black America, because if a mistake is made and they say, oh, well, our one Black person said this was cool, right? Then it's going to come back to you. I think that what you have to do is, one, do as much research as you possibly can, because your Black experience may not be the entire Black experience, right? That's number one, is recognize and acknowledge the fact that you don't speak for all Black folks, right? That don't let anybody put that pressure on you. Two, absolutely speak up and give your thoughts, but give your thoughts in a way that is informed. Say, I'm not gonna answer right now in the moment. Let me go back and do some research. Give me some time to be pensive about it so we can think about this in the same way we think about the other business decisions that we make, and use data and use perspective, both from other folks besides yourself. Tell them, hey, we probably should have more than one Black person in the room for this. So we don't have enough Black people who work here. We can fix that. We should be fixing that. We can walk and chew gum at the same time. Let's go out and hire a Black agency to help us do this work, right? So that we have a coalition of voices, people who already are a part of the community, who are a part of the culture, who can help us do that. The other thing is that you need to talk to them about beginning with the end in mind. Let's not make these pledges unless we have a way where we're going to show how we're progressing against these commitments that we've made. We should build that into our plan and to our press release, right? Don't release a press release about these pledges that we're going to make until we have a line in the press release that says, and here's how we're going to update you on our progress. Here's the cadence. Every quarter we're going to do it. We're going to put it on our website. We're going to hold ourselves accountable for it. We're going to also hire these folks to help us with our accountability measures. Here's how we're going to measure it, right? Those are the things that we have to say, I think, in those spaces, and not be excited about the press release and the pledge and about the big dollar value, because you can pull up the article. Black Enterprise was looking at, there's been, I think, something like $7 billion of pledges around work that corporations are going to be investing in, everything from racial justice work to Black small and medium-sized businesses. But the vast majority of those announcements do not include measures for success, nor do they include anything that says how they're going to hold themselves accountable or how they're going to update us on the progress. That's a gap that we as communicators, you're going to have to clean that up.
Absolutely.
Like they're going to call in the Black person in marketing and communications if they get it wrong to help clean it up on the back end. Save yourself some time, sister and brother, who's working on that project, and say, let's begin this with the end in mind. And let's get some other voices in the room, because if this fails, I don't want to be the person that messed up the one time when Black folks were supposed to get $100 million from my company.
Absolutely. And I think that's the thing that we try to educate on our clients on all the time is, yes, it is great if you support these organizations. It is great if you give these dollars, but everything that you commit needs to be measurable, and you need to track your progress. And I think that if you're working internally, it may be difficult to come back to your company and say, look, we need to do X, Y, and Z. But what we've told people is like, if you don't do it, someone else is going to do it for you.
Yeah.
It's all eyes on the movement within these companies and what they're doing. So it's better for you internally to say, hey, we should talk about this and what's our plan for reporting on what we've done over the past 90 days, 6 months.
If I owned a Black marketing agency right now today, the number one thing agenda on my 2021 agenda would be is providing a service to the corporations who have made these pledges, and let me help you with your accountability process. Let me help you with how you report on this, because there's a specific language and lexicon that you're going to need. You can say what you want to say about cancel culture and woke culture,
right,
but cancel culture and woke culture and Black Twitter is the reason why we got them flags down in South Carolina 5 years ago.
Absolutely.
It's the reason why we now have companies and corporations talking about using the words racial justice in press releases that they're sending out. Black Twitter, woke culture, cancel culture, whatever you want to call it, I call it social currency.
Absolutely.
Black folks have more social currency and digital currency than any other group, right? We start talking about something on Twitter or on social media or on TikTok, and it's viral. It becomes a news segment. We make up 14% of the population, but we make up 28% of the people who are on Twitter. And our conversations drive national conversations, and national conversations make national news. And when you get national news coverage, you get everybody's attention, including the business community.
Absolutely. I cannot say anything to what you just said, because it's so true. And it's actually a perfect segue, because the one thing is that if you look maybe, and I'm not sure of the exact time, but like Black Lives Matter really got popular maybe 4 to 5 years ago. Companies would not utter Black Lives Matter. Why do you think that's different today?
Consumers have more voice and more choice than they've ever had before, right? And I take it back to what we've said about people talking about cancel culture, and companies and corporations now recognize that they will be called out. That's the power that we have. And we can use our power for good, or we can use our power for foolishness, right? And I love some foolishness. Like if you look at my Twitter right now, I have a tweet about my superpowers kicking in today, right? But I also say that we have to use our digital currency and that social currency for the things that matter to us. And Black folks have been doing that. What people don't necessarily recognize is that, Time's Up, that was Black women started that, right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Black women in digital spaces started that. And so I think what's different now than 5 years ago is that Black women and Black millennials have decided that they are not going to just allow the status quo to take place. Where they see epicenters of power, they're going to use those epicenters of power. And those epicenters of power for Black folks consistently are economics, where we decide to spend our money. If we say, hey, we're not going to spend our money with you if you do these things, right? I think one of the last things that I worked on with Nielsen, I think the numbers were something like 58% of Black folks expect companies to take a stance on social issues that are important to them, and 37%, and they are 37% more likely to buy a product from that company if they take a social stance. So a lot of the reasons why you see Black Lives Matter pins on flight attendants, or you see Black Lives Matter on the sides of buildings for corporations in ways that you would never have seen that before, is because they recognize the economics of it, right? And that's fine. For whatever reason you're doing it, as long as you do it, right? That's my perspective on
And see, the interesting thing is that I think they've always, well, maybe not always, but for a while, they've known how we're driving their profitability as a company, right?
The difference, though, is companies have known that.
That's what I'm saying.
Black folks haven't known our power until very recently.
Yep.
And so now that we know our power and we're exercising that power, now you see change, right? And so I think there are tons of Black folks who I wrote an op-ed for BET about the Popeyes chicken sandwich phenomenon, right? That we gave away almost $25 million in free advertising to Popeyes around that darn chicken sandwich, right? And my question was to us as a community, what does Popeyes owe us in return for the almost $25 million in free press that we gave them? If we were talking about a $3.99 chicken sandwich and I gave you $3.99 and you gave me a tasty, delicious lunch, then we call it even. Right. But when my community gives you $25 million in free advertising and then in turn residual profits on that, I have the right to ask a question. What is our reciprocal relationship? And I think that the news around that only furthered the idea for Black millennials and Black women. And I call out Black millennials and Black women because the data supports that Black women and Black millennials are the folks who are really driving a lot of the social conversation and the social change and the social impact conversations in digital
Stacey
spaces.
Abrams.
Listen, don't get me started talking about Stacey Abrams because I have only been in a room with her once, and I love the woman. Literally pray for her because of what she was able to accomplish, and the way that she was able to say, this governor defeat, this was just a battle. I'm in it for the war, for the long haul. Yep. You know what I mean? Oh yeah, I lost this battle, but I'm gonna come back and I'm gonna be strategic. I am going to out-register you, and then I'm going to get folks to the polls. You talk about what her and Fair Fight did with, registering almost 1 million voters to combat the voter suppression that has taken place in this state is actually a model.
Turning Georgia blue.
Yeah, turning Georgia blue, and which is actually a model that, quite honestly, could work in a lot of other southern states. 38% of the state of Mississippi is African American. We start looking at other states in the South, and you start registering folks who are non-voters who will vote. If you're a Democrat, vote Democratic. Then you have a solution to potentially flip a lot of other states blue, particularly in the South, where large swaths of African Americans, who typically are Democratic voters, actually reside. The problem isn't with getting voters to flip to be Democrats. You're not going to get, if we're talking about political, you're not going to get most white voters to flip Democrat. Yeah. That's just not the way, that's not what the data says. That's not a political statement. That's a data statement, right? Is that, white people haven't voted Democratic in 20 years, right? Not in the majority. So if you're thinking about strategy and you're thinking about numbers, the reality is that you go out and get non-voters. That's the biggest voting bloc in this country, people who don't vote. So that's nothing but blue ocean. You go out and start registering new people. That's your solution.
And convincing them, even with this latest election, that their vote matters, because those are the non-voters, that they don't think that it really matters whether they vote or not, and we see now that it does.
And here's why I think that political example is germane to this conversation around consumers, is that when you tell consumers how powerful they are, they move through the world very differently. right? When we talk up to when I was doing the work of at Nielsen talking to Black consumers about their economic power, you literally could see light bulbs going off all over the room, right? And so roles change, missions don't. I left Nielsen and went to SiriusXM and covered culture and economics for Urban View and Black Radio on SiriusXM, an even larger platform. And this is how I know that that God will make room for your talents, right? So I may have talked to 100,000 folks when I was at Nielsen, but I talked to millions of folks on SiriusXM.
Speak on it.
God will make room for your talents. Mm-hmm. Roles may change, but if your mission doesn't, you never know what's next for you. And I think that here's the thing I think is really important for Black professionals is that a lot of Black professionals aren't working in a space where they can actually come to work and say, hey, this is what you need to do, and be heard. Mm-hmm. A lot of Black professionals are in roles and in companies where they're the only one, they're the first one. They're like, look, I gotta keep this good job, because if Big Mama's water heater goes out, I'm the person who the family comes to pay for Big Mama's water heater to get fixed. And I get that. I understand it. I understand it intimately, right? Mm-hmm. But what I say to all of my mentees is that, one, your talents will make a way for you, will create a place for you. And if you are in a place where you cannot be authentic, you ain't gotta be a wholesale, but be authentic and use the things that make you unique as an asset. There's a place for you somewhere where you'll be able to do that, right? And for me, it was about saying that I've had some great jobs, but most of those jobs were vehicles and not destinations. Your job and that money and that check that you get, that should be wings and agency, not shackles and a blindfold and a gag, right? That is the way I say, if there's any advice I could give to people who look like us, who do this work, is that, of course, your gifts will make room for you. There may be some uncomfortable spaces and places in there for you as you get there, but some jobs are just vehicles to get you to the destination, not the destination. Do not stay in a place where your authenticity and your agency and your authority is not valued, because there's a place out there where it will be valued.
You know, you said so many things that I'm like, yep, that one and that one. Because, the one thing that I think we, even when having this conversation, trying to think of how it would shape out, is that, like, we're Black communicators, we're Black marketers, but we are also Black people.
Yep.
And being the only person that has a seat at the table, while it can be amazing, when I think about all of the board appointments and they added this Black woman to this board and this Black woman to that board, I'm always like, that sounds terrible for her. Mm-hmm. Because even though I'm sure you have to exhibit a lot of courage to sit at that table and be the representative for your entire community, it also can be taxing on those individuals as well. And so thinking about, as Black communicators, you are, not only is your company coming to you, they're asking you to provide feedback or direction or so forth and so on. They also, you also oftentimes are subject to the same racism and discrimination that they are speaking out against. Mm-hmm. And so the one thing, you said a lot as you talk about, like, finding the space for you, but, like, how did you find the courage to say, this isn't for me, I'm gonna take the risk? Like, when you left Nielsen, you spent a whole year doing what you wanted to do.
Yeah.
And how do you think that you got there?
It's interesting. I think for me, I was having a great time at Nielsen. I was having a great time. I had a job that I enjoyed, that I loved. I had a boss that valued what I was doing. I had created a space inside of that organization to help them understand the value of what I brought to the table. Because a lot of times companies don't understand your value. You have to tell them the value. We've worked in agency life. We've been consultants before. Mm-hmm. A lot of times you have to explain to the client why the work you do is valuable. You have to put the value metric on it for them to help them understand it. And I think that a lot of that is us advocating for ourselves at work to say, look, let me put this into context for you of what the value of this is and what the risk is of you not having a voice like this is. Let me point you towards some people who have gotten it wrong. Right? Let me point you towards what the risk looks like. One of the most powerful things I've ever leveraged in my PR and communications career is talking to executives about, here's the best possible headline, here's the worst possible headline. And that fear of the worst possible headline will oftentimes help people understand their what the risks really are. For me, I recognized that it would be uncomfortable for me if I said what I needed to say in certain spaces. I recognized that there was a risk there, but I always tried to say, I'm looking at my career as a part of my life, not my whole life, right? And so my career and the thing that helps me make money should also give me agency. And so I know that I'm gonna say some things that may be high risk. And so I'm gonna manage the rest of my life to where if I take that risk and the company says, hey, let's part as friends, I can say, let's part as friends and still survive until I find the opportunity that lets me do what I want to do next, right? And so I don't throw out roles change, missions don't as some cliche. I throw that out to say that that's a tough statement to live by, but if you live by it, I honestly believe that you'll be okay. I'm a Sunday school kid, right? So for me, it's always like my grandmother would say to me, she gave me this Bible verse when I was a kid, when I first went off to a leadership camp. But essentially it's like, be afraid of nothing. Fear not, for the same God that's with you today here will be with you there. And so I truly believe that the same God that promoted me, provided for me, and protected me here will promote me, provide for me, and protect me over there, right? And so I don't look at my career as my whole life. I look at my whole life, and then there's a piece of my career here. There's a piece of my faith here. There's a piece of my self-care here. There's a piece of my, commitment to my community over here. There are certain things that no matter what level I am, in what company I go to, that I just have made some commitments that I'm not going to do. I'm not going to, I'm not going to shoplift talent from my friends or from consultants. Mm-hmm. I'm not going to shoplift time from agencies and companies that look like me. I'm not going to lowball them on the contracts, right? I'm not going to do that. And companies most of the time will respect it when you say, I'm not going to try and lowball the agency on it.
That's an issue, right? No, seriously, that was not part of the plan, but saying that is really, really strong because often, this is something that I meet so many people in the industry, corporate, agency, otherwise, that are experiencing that. And the first person to change it is going to be us.
Yeah.
I literally was having a conversation with some friends yesterday saying, we have to be transparent about dollars and cents.
Yeah.
And we have to, if we see that someone is undervaluing themselves, it's okay for us to say, hey, add a couple more zeros on that and then send it back to me. Because
100%.
You know.
Listen, when I was we talked about the fact that when I left Nielsen, I consulted, I spent a year on the speaker circuit talking about diversity and inclusion and what it looks like at the executive level. I went to SiriusXM and was a culture and economics contributor for Urban View, and really did a lot of things that I was really interested in. And I had a woman at a company, I won't mention the company's name, but I sent over my speaker fee. And she said, she called me on the phone. She didn't respond in email.
No paper
trail. And she said, I think you're really undervaluing your talent here. And she was like, I know you've spoken to some other places. She was like, but we value your perspective a little bit more than this. And I was like, well, how much more do you value it?
Right.
But she's like, I think,
give me a number.
She was like, I think you should do a little bit of research, come back to me. I can't tell you how much I appreciated that, right? And I vowed then, I was like, I'm gonna do that same thing for somebody else one day. And I had done things like that for people in the past, but it was really, really meaningful. Because one of the things that I'll say about making a career transition, because I did make a pretty significant career transition when I left Nielsen, was that I would say to communicators and professionals, because you talked a little bit about personal brand here, is that be just as passionate about how you manage the brand of what comes before the comma, the Andrew McCaskill part, as you are about what comes after the comma, the title and the corporation you work for. Because whether I'm here for another 5 years or 5 months, the Andrew McCaskill is with me forever, right? And so that's about ethics, that's about integrity, that's about community and network and treating people fairly and being a good manager and a good boss to people, but also being a really good consultant and asset to their leadership teams, right? There's a lot that goes into what comes before the comma, because I will say that my phone calls got answered a lot faster when I was Andrew McCaskill, senior vice president of a blue chip company, who also wielded a multi-million-dollar corporate checkbook, than they did when I was Andrew McCaskill calling, right? When I wasn't working for that company. And that's part of that risk factor too. But it's also part of knowing what you bring to the table too. Is that, okay, well, I'll call somebody else.
Absolutely. It's funny because we don't see you that way. We absolutely are like, first of all, Andrew was not, he did not miss a beat. And I'm sure you went through your own things internally to get to that level. But, on the outside looking at you, you are the success story as it relates to not tying yourself so closely to a brand that you lose your value should you part ways. You were speaking louder when you were on your own. You were more vocal and you were really honing in and saying freely what needed to be said. And I think that's why so many people were like, okay, call Andrew. We were like, call Andrew for this conversation.
Right.
And so there's two things that I want, I'm speaking, we're speaking to the communicator and the marketer that may be in-house, that's on the having to solve some of these problems. And then we're also speaking to the ones who are on the outside trying to figure out how to navigate, some of the issues internally. But as we think about companies that have actually, because I won't say the name, but as soon as people start dropping statements, I start adding them to my file, because I was very much so what are they saying? And how are people responding to it? And so if you go to Twitter and you look at those Twitter statements, then you know how people really felt. Because a lot of companies dropped their statement on Twitter and the comments went crazy. Yeah. And there were former employees chiming in and all of these different things. So for those companies who released a statement about how, they were seriously supportive of Black Lives Matter and people ripped them to shreds, what is their path to redemption?
If I were advising those companies, I would say that your reactive statement and response is always to say, hey, this is a journey. This is a journey that we are beginning, that we're committed to, that we're putting metrics against, that we are going to update you on our accountability. We're going to also talk to third parties to hold us accountable for these things, and we're going to build that into it. We have not always done this well. We've not always prioritized it, but moving forward, it's a priority, and we're going to come back to the community, right? And we're going to be accountable for it. We will make some mistakes. We will get some of it wrong, but we're going to look at this from a 360-degree way of thinking about it. And I think that part of that is an opportunity for those Black folks in the room and Black agencies to come in and say, look, the solution is 360. The solution is hiring more Black talent in-house.
Number one.
The solution is putting metrics against these dollars. The solution is working with third-party organizations and advocacy groups and building out a relationship with them, not writing them a check, right? The solution is I'm going to make a commitment to have more diverse suppliers. The solution is I don't know exactly what all I'm going to do with this $100 million that I have pledged to racial injustice and small and medium-sized businesses, but the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to hold that $100 million in a Black bank so that there's immediate impact, right? There's immediate impact because Black small businesses and people who want to open small businesses are more likely to get a loan from a Black bank than they are from a financial institution that is not owned and run by African Americans. And so you start to look at our workforce. We're gonna do that. Our supplier diversity. We're gonna do that. You know, our relationships with the community. We're gonna do that. Our relationships, our financial relationships, we're going to do that. If I were the president and CEO of a black bank, I would get together with all of the other top 20 Black banks and write an open letter to the CFOs of the Fortune 100 and say, you have foundation money, you have commitments that you're making to racial justice, and we're writing an open letter to you saying that we would like for you to put those dollars in a Black bank. It doesn't have to be mine, it could be one of the other ones. I would take whatever advertising dollars I had, I would go to a Black agency and say, help me put a copy of that open letter in American Banker, in Wall Street Journal, and start to have a conversation in public, in broad daylight, because Black bankers have been going to corporations and, in conference rooms having the conversation quietly in secret forever. Let's have the conversation out in the light of day and see what happens. Let's try something else, right? And so I think that when we do things collectively is when we have our most power. And so it's not just that one Black bank doing it, it's the 25 writing an open letter. Send that letter along with the Association of Banking Professionals. Get together with the folks of Black financial planners and all write that open letter to the heads of the major foundations. Write that open letter to the CFOs of all of those organizations and see what happens, because one CFO reacting to it from the right organization is a domino effect of everybody else.
Yep.
Our collective power is where we really have the highest impact.
I don't know if you knew my questions in advance, but that was a perfect segue, because we, as Black people, are making the shift to the for us, by us, supporting Black businesses intentionally, supporting Black banks. Like, we are taking that upon ourselves. And not everybody even knows to what extent it's really going to have an impact. But number one, why is that so important to keep the Black dollar circulating within our community?
Well, one, we've seen the evidence that it works for other cultures. I spent a lot of time when I was here in Atlanta in fintech and in financial services. And it's amazing, we will sometimes walk down a street and marvel at the number of businesses in Black communities or in Asian communities that are owned by Asian Americans, right? And listen, I love a model that works. Asian Americans always put their money in, not always, no, there's no definites, but
Right.
the size of the average Asian owned bank is 10 times the size of the largest black owned bank in this country. And so I think that when we start thinking about our collective power and we start thinking about what it means to support a black business or a black bank and what that means for community, when particularly a black woman, and I call out sisters just because the numbers just speak to this, right? And there are a lot of brothers that are doing some amazing things, but I call out sisters in particular is that when a black woman owns a business, the ecosystem around her is primarily black. She has other black suppliers. She spends that money. She has black consultants, right? And so I think that model we've seen in other communities. And the for us, by us is so important because, one, a whole generation coming up, they need elders. They need to see our example, right?
Absolutely.
They need to see examples of success. I saw examples of success of people, of a handful of black folks who had made it in corporate spaces. And I was like, I can do that, right? So I'm going to aspire to that. Our next generations need examples. They need elders who have built and created businesses, hired black folks, created other businesses, a part of those ecosystems to go around that. And we need agency. We need to be able to hire people who look like us, buy supplies from other people who look like us. And the reality, so much of it is that community, we have to start looking at how my dollar impacts you and your child or your mom or your dad, right? Because so many of our non-Hispanic white counterparts, that's just intrinsically a part of how they do business. Mm-hmm. And so what I would say to any black person who's out there thinking right now about opening up a business or starting or developing a product is that black folks have been so underserved by manufacturing and retail in terms of specificity, right? Mm-hmm. That there are no saturated categories for us at this point. If you have a product that is specific and unique to black folks, I don't care if it's a candle company, I don't care if it's a hair care product, I don't care if it's a lip balm or a lip shade or a makeup or a stockings company or fingernail polish or deodorant or feminine hygiene. There's nobody that's really created things for us with a level of specificity. And when we create things for us, and we double down on over-serving black folks, you can still be rich over-serving blac folks as an entrepreneur. I believe that. Look at Super Scent. Look at, there are tons of other examples. Mm-hmm. Super Scent from Crayon Case.
I know.
Yeah.
I already know. But no, it's funny that you say that because in addition to that, I think we also need to stop apologizing for it. Because we're probably the only community that people are questioning why people need to buy black, or people are questioning these things. And I think we need to just stop apologizing for it and just do it. And let's just see what happens.
100%.
Yeah.
Listen, I've never heard any of my Jewish friends apologize for helping other my in their faith. Mm-hmm. I've never heard any of them do that, and I have a ton of Jewish friends, right? I've never heard any of my Asian friends apologize for putting their Asian friends on, or I've never heard them apologize for getting their clothes cleaned at their neighbors' dry cleaners versus someplace else because they're part of their community, right? Mm-hmm. Never heard that. Right. And I think that we also have to, stop perpetuating this narrative about, well, I like to support black businesses, but I had a bad instance with a black business one time, and I'm not going back. You have had a bad instance in every major retailer, and you have been back. You have had a bad experience at the grocery store in your neighborhood, and you have gone right back to that grocery store. Mm-hmm. Give black folks the same second and third chance that you give the other big names and big brands that have looked at you sideways while you were shopping, or that had an employee who was rude to you one time. I promise you that one rude employee at, Exit Mart, I'm not gonna say a retailer at Exit Mart, right? You taking your behind back to Exit Mart in 2 weeks because they got double coupons. So give that black business the exact same grace, I would say.
No, absolutely. First of all, we have covered so many things, and I think what's really amazing about this conversation is that you have dropped so many blueprints for people. So anybody that's listening, he's told you what you need to do as a black agency. He's told you what you need to do if you're in-house and you're representing a corporation or a business or nonprofit. And you also have even talked about what black banks need to do to really change the game for themselves. So what would be a final thought as we're thinking about kind of the existing landscape? We know that this has created a lot of opportunities for us, but we also, while we're taking advantage of those opportunities, we still need to remain vocal and remain advocates. Like, what do you say to that, to the people who are listening, as a charge for them?
I say, first of all, the last thing that the ref says to the two people in the ring right before a match starts is protect yourself at all times. Black professionals, protect yourself at all times. And what does that mean? It means different things to different people. Protect your spirit, right? Do not let these companies and these jobs take your agency, take your spirit, take your joy, take your edges, take your hairline if you men. Like, do not let these companies drive you crazy. There is a place for you out here in the working world that will allow you to not be harassed and terrorized every day for the color of your skin or for your commitment to community. Protect yourself at all times. That's number one, right? Because whether you are at this company or that company, you taking you with you. Even if they give you that box with your stuff in it, you taking you with you. So protect and take care of you. And that means up-leveling your skills. And that means staying current. That means also staying close to the culture. The black culture drives American culture, and as American culture goes, thus goes the world. What you have is magic. What you have is what everyone is trying to figure out the secret sauce for. I can't tell you how many times I've heard people say, somebody said to me today, how do we get on black Twitter? And the black folks in the room are like, you know what I mean?
This question is still being asked.
And so, listen, so I say, protect yourself, stay close to the culture and the community, keep your brand as close to you and as close to your daily work as you keep the brands that pay you. Because at the end of the day, you are the asset. You know what I mean? Like Shonda Rhimes has this there's this quote where somebody had said something crazy to Shonda Rhimes that Netflix was dangling candy in front of her to woo her away from ABC. And Shonda Rhimes said, what they don't understand is that I'm the candy. Right? And so that's what my year off from corporate America taught me, because I got some really good calls during that time, right? And it's that if you protect your integrity and your brand while you're protecting the brands of other folks, you don't even have to promote your brand. I know I'm out there, right? Like, I know that I'm out there. I'm probably out there more than most communications professionals are. But I'm like Diddy. I like to dance in the videos and sing on the track, right? So that's who I am. But that's not the average communications professional. Most communications professionals are behind the scenes. That's where they do their best work. But you still protect your ethics. You still protect your integrity. You still protect your brand. And you are the candy. That gift that you have will make a space for you. And so that's the thing that I would say for professionals is protect yourself, protect your spirit. Don't let a job wear you down. know when to leave. Some of these jobs are vehicles and not destinations, right? And be really, really clear about mission. What is it that makes you enjoy this work? Because it's hard work. We know as comms people, we're on 24/7. We're on 24/7. We work longer than half of the folks who are in our building, sometimes making twice as much money as we make, right? And so you got to find something in this that you really love doing, and something about it that feeds your mission, or supplement it outside of your life. There are a lot of hours in the day. Do not give all of them to a company. Save some soul to keep, and figure out what it is that helps you merge the things that are important to you with the work you do. And that was always my goal, is to figure out how to get to the point to where my passion about impact and community also is an asset for me at work. And I've been able to find that. And when I didn't find it, I left.
That, ladies and gentlemen, you have just experienced a masterclass from Andrew McCaskill. We are not worthy. No, seriously, this has really just been a conversation full of gems. It's been so important, and I know that we're going to get some great feedback on this conversation. The one thing that I want to just kind of put a bow on this, when I hit Andrew up on LinkedIn, Andrew does not respond to your text messages for like 2 weeks at least. But when I hit him up on LinkedIn, he immediately responded, was like, absolutely, let's do it. Let's do it. And he was intentional about doing it at a Black-owned business. And of course, we're like, why not the Gathering Spot? And, like we've seen, I reached out to Ryan, same thing. I was like, hey, Ryan, I'm going to have this conversation with the Black Public Relations Society of Atlanta, and we want to have it at the Gathering Spot. He's like, say less, and so that attitude is why we get to the places that we are going, so thank you so much for everything, because we realize that what you do, and you being vocal and being an advocate and speaking out for people, even when it doesn't necessarily directly benefit you, is so meaningful for our field, and it's so meaningful for our community. So thank you so much for everything that you've done. And for those listening, Black Public Relations Society of Atlanta is offering 50% off membership through the end of January. And, we are committed to having these types of conversations and really just filling our people up with what they need to really take their careers to the next level and really find a space for themselves that they feel comfortable and happy in what they're doing. And so if you guys want to find out more about us, look us up, Beepers Atlanta. You'll find us everywhere. And of course, the Gathering Spot for the Beepers members, the Gathering Spot is one of the best places. But I just think it's so meaningful for us to be both products of the Black Public Relations Society of Atlanta. And I'm proud to be on the stage with you.
I'm proud to be here with you too. Thank you so much for asking me.
Thank you. Thank you so much.